Okay, let's see. Welcome everyone to the Radiant Torah with Rebbe Nachman and teachings of the other tzaddikim. Does everybody have me in a speaker view? Yes? Okay, I don't see that, but as long as you see that, that's great. Okay, so first of all, I want to thank Dr. Eleanor Gaudis for sponsoring these classes, and it should be in the merit of Klal Yisrael. Okay, so we're going to start with a brief overview of Parshat Emor, and we're not obviously going to be covering everything in the parsha this week, but we will be covering some of the special laws pertaining to the Kohanim, the priests. We're going to have a brief overview of them and the psychospiritual reasons behind those laws. We are going to also speak briefly about the meaning of chillul Hashem and kiddush Hashem, a desecration of Hashem's name and a sanctification of Hashem's name, and what this means halakhically and spiritually. We are then going to go on to the Moedei Hashem, the holiness meetings of Hashem and Mikra Kodesh, and the proclamations of holiness, which are the festivals. Then we're going to go on to the Omer count, which we are in the middle of right now. And for anybody who doesn't know, I think it's Thursday night is Lag BaOmer. And then we are going to speak about Shavuot. Let me see. So I have to somehow close out those participants because it's a little bit distracting. So the first thing we're going to talk about is the Kohen, the priest. And what we have to understand about the priesthood, this idea of the Kohanim, this hereditary idea in which a Kohen, who is only a male, comes down from Aaron HaKohen. And this sets him and his children apart. He must maintain a higher level of purity than the rest of us, okay? And there are special emphases for him because of his temple service. He has to do things that the rest of us don't have to do, okay? So a few of those things are, something very interesting is he's not allowed to get drunk. He's not even really supposed to get tipsy. Many Kohanim don't drink at all, maybe just for kiddush, and some of them have weak wine. Why? Because they have to be prepared for at any second to be able to perform the service in the Beis HaMikdash, the temple in Jerusalem. So what's so fascinating about this is that the temple isn't here yet. Okay, we know what's sitting on top of Har Habayis. It's the mosque. We don't see the temple. Okay, and yet the Kohen must be prepared. So this idea is that I see somebody's in the waiting room that can come in. Okay, so this idea is that the Kohen is in a state of readiness, signaling to us that the service of the Beis HaMikdash could begin any moment. Okay, Mashiach can come any moment. Now, this isn't a class on Mashiach, yet Mashiach permeates every single parsha, every single word in the Torah. Because why? Because the ultimate end goal of everything is Olam Haba, the world to come, the Geula, the rectification of the whole world, the release and liberation of the whole world, the coming out of exile, and the coming of Mashiach. I want to mention that I think all of you here, I already have your addresses, but Eleonora has We have a special book dedicated to her mother. She's one of the sponsors of it, and we're going to send you all copies. This book, I spent several months last year writing it. It's an introduction to the concepts of Mashiach. And Hannah Snyder, who's up there on your screen, is going to send them out to you. I might send out some too. We're going to divide it up. So please keep an eye on your mailboxes for this wonderful book dedicated to Hannah Bat Ephraim, Eleanor Gaudis's beloved mother. Now,
thank you so much.
You're welcome. So, Charlene, I love your enthusiasm. So anyway, this idea is that the Cohen's teaching us a lesson. He has to remain pure. There's certain things a Cohen can't do, certain types of mourning practices. He can't contaminate himself in terms of tuma, in terms of spiritual contamination with a mace, with a dead body, and so on and so forth. He's only allowed to marry certain women who fit into certain categories. We don't need to go into all the details today. The main thing to keep in mind is he's here to teach us something just by the fact that he's remaining in this state of readiness, this excitement and readiness. Now, why do we honor the Kohanim? We have to honor them. So there are many reasons. They perform the temple service and so on and so forth. But I want to briefly mention that for those of us who are American and who grew up in America, this concept of honoring somebody from birth is only really a Jewish concept, okay? Because the American ideal is you make something of yourself. And that's the Jewish ideal too. Whoever's not muted, please mute yourself. Thank you. The Jewish ideal is also we make something of ourselves spiritually. There's no ceiling for us. We can really go pretty high, spiritually speaking, yet we can only go within the realm, within the lane that's kosher for us. The Cohen has one lane. The Levi has another. The Yisrael, which most of the Jewish people are, they fall into that category, has another. Men have another lane. Women have another lane. Children have another lane. And then, of course, they grow up into men and women and they join the other lanes. So this is the beautiful concept of healthy boundaries, yet achieving the most within your wheelhouse, within your area. And that's another thing that the Kohen reminds us of. Okay, next. We're going to talk about the concept of the chillul Hashem and the kiddush Hashem. We're going to touch on this briefly. Let me get my safer here. Okay, so this parsha has the basic overview of the ideas. We can't make a chillul Hashem, a desecration of Hashem's name. That's a prohibition. And we have a positive commandment to make a kiddush Hashem. So what is a chillul Hashem? So there are a few things. The first is that a person must not transgress three prohibitions: murder, idol worship, and immorality. That any one of those is a chillul Hashem. There are other chillul Hashems as well. And these specific ones, we know that the Torah says we must give our lives rather than cross that line. Yet, in terms of idol worship, which would mean conversion to another religion, we know that in the Inquisition and even in the Holocaust, there were Jews who crossed that particular line. So how could this be? Did they make a chillul Hashem? So what we have to understand is, number one, is that they probably weren't sincere about it. They did this under duress. And number two, we can't judge anyone based on our own concept, meaning that the fear for one person might be so overwhelming that they lose the part of themselves that's able to distinguish between a kiddush Hashem and a chillul Hashem. Now, God willing, none of us is ever going to be put in any of these categories. We'll never have to make any of these really incredibly difficult choices. Still, and Jews, by the way, we don't fantasize about being martyrs. We're not, those suicide bombers, God forbid, and we're not, the other people who have a history of all this martyrdom in their religion. This isn't our fantasy. We want to live. We want to live to serve Hashem. However, we do have martyrs, and we have to honor them and their sacrifice. At the same time, this isn't a goal. And at the same time, we don't judge someone who crossed that line. Okay. This is so important because I actually got asked this question the other day about someone who had someone in her family convert to another religion who was exceedingly painful for her. Okay. And the idea is we really today even, yes, it's a sin. Yes, it's a chillul Hashem on the surface, but we really don't understand what caused that person to do it. And even though they weren't under threat of, it wasn't a life and death situation. And why I want to mention this is because we have to be compassionate with family, friends, and so on, because the Torah tells us that a Jew, and Talmud tells us, a Jew doesn't sin unless a ruach shtus, a foolish spirit enters him. Okay. Something took over his common sense and his neshama and pushed him in that direction. So we have to look away and try to not judge with such strictness other people. Ourselves, on the other hand, looking in the mirror, we need to be firm with ourselves. So I wanted to mention that because I don't actually know if she's here in the class because I'm not looking at all the sign-ins, but somebody asked me that question and it was heartbreaking for her. Okay. Now, a kiddush Hashem is a sanctification of Hashem's name. And we're not going to go over all the chillul Hashems and the kiddush Hashems, but how do we sanctify Hashem's name? So one of the most amazing ways we sanctify Hashem's name, okay, and it is a mitzvah to sanctify his name, and it is given in this parsha, is to understand that every choice we made, we have an opportunity to make a kiddush Hashem or the opposite. Every single choice we make. Now, most people think this means, well, in front of other people, in front of non-Jews or in front of Jews, in front of other people. The truth is, the main law is in front of other Jews. If you are a visibly religious Jew, you have to hold yourself to a certain standard in public. You can't lose your temper. You shouldn't, you're not going to steal, you shouldn't, do something that's going to cause other people, Jewish or non-Jewish, to look at a religious Jew and say, ugh, look at those people. At the same time, if you're not a visibly religious Jew, and for many women, it's hard to tell, it doesn't matter, you still, as a Jew, have an obligation to keep yourself from being the target of disdain, repulsion, or so on and so forth. We're supposed to be cautious. Yet the deepest part of a kiddush Hashem is when we make a decision, not because someone's watching us, not because we're going to get a reward or a punishment or any of this, but sheerly and solely because we're doing it for Hashem. This is the ultimate, even though it's the most private, kiddush Hashem. And no one else may ever know. It's between us and Hashem. And this brings in this idea of a Jew isn't just a Jew in the street or in public or when people can see. A Jew is a Jew all the time. And by sanctifying ourselves and sanctifying Hashem's name, we are living fully as a Jew. Hashem is everywhere. He sees us everywhere. Everywhere everywhere, everything we do. And he's looking for the good in us. He's looking to see in us the good. And he looks away from the not good. And we all have the stuff that we wish wasn't part of us. But Hashem loves us so much, he wants to see the good. And personally, I find that a lot more motivating than Hashem standing over us, ready to scold us. And I know that there are a lot of sort of refugees from other strains of Judaism that come into Breslov and find this incredible feeling of, oh, Hashem wants a connection with me. He wants to see the good in me. Yes, I still have to learn the Torah, follow his mitzvahs, improve myself, so on and so forth. I shouldn't make a chillul Hashem, but Hashem wants to see the good in me. He loves me. I'm precious to him. And so this kiddush Hashem of the highest order is sometimes the most private. Sometimes it isn't an action even. Sometimes it's not just giving tzedakah in private or forcing yourself to get up early and pray. Sometimes it's not any of that. Sometimes it's as simple as changing your thoughts from a negative spiral to a positive thought. Sometimes it's as simple as having a negative thought about another person, God forbid, or a negative thought about yourself, God forbid, or just a negative compulsion, whatever that is, switching your thoughts around towards a positive thought, whether that means you have to pick up a Sefer Tehillim, a book of Psalms and read something, whether it means that you can just think positively about Hashem, whatever it is. This is a true Kiddush Hashem. And we probably may, if you think back, you probably make them all the time, not even realizing it. But knowing the import of this, the significance of this, we're even more inspired to make more of them. All these little moments, from moment to moment to moment, every moment counts. And when we get to the Omer, we're going to talk about how every moment and every day counts more. Okay, that's chillul Hashem, Kiddush Hashem. We're skipping over some other wonderful things in this packed parsha. And we're going to go to the Moedei Hashem, the appointed meeting times with Hashem, the Mikra Kodesh, the proclamations of holiness. And hold on one second. And what we understand from this is that these are our holidays, and the Torah is dealing with some specific days. In this parsha, I have to find my notes. In this parsha is mentioned first Shabbat, okay, then Pesach, then the Korban Omer, okay, so Shabbos, Passover, the Omer offering, which is on the second day of Passover, okay. That's when we actually start to count the Omer today. Then it goes on to Shavuot, which we're going to talk about today, Sukkot and Shemini Atzeret. And in between there, it has Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. It actually does it in the correct order of the year. Obviously, because Purim and Hanukkah are days post Tanakh, they're not mentioned. So these are Mikra Kodesh. What does that mean? So Mikra means to cry out or to proclaim holiness. Kodesh is holiness. And you can look and you can even remind yourself, because it's important to remember that these are a proclamation. We say this in Kiddush on Yom Tov, the Mikra Kodesh, Moedim L'Simcha, but it's important to remember that we're proclaiming the holiness. We're joining in Hashem, we're proclaiming it. So how can you remember? The kra sounds like cry out. I have all these little tricks to remember. If you ever want my list, just contact me. It's actually not so organized, but one day we'll type it up. So Mikra Kodesh. So we're proclaiming the holiness. The first day is Shabbat. That's what's mentioned. Shabbat comes 50 plus weeks a year. That's the day determined by Hashem for kedusha. Okay. Now, the next days, Pesach, Shavuot, Sukkot, the Shalos, the Shalos Regalim, the 3 pilgrimage festivals, okay, those we determine along with Rosh Chodesh. Okay, we determine them. How? So we don't have this anymore. For those of you who, I think I did an audio class on this about how we determine when Rosh Chodesh is and when the holidays are. What we do is we go and we, the Sanhedrin would go and they would look and see when the moon was, when the new month was, and they would let people know. Okay, and that's how we would know when the holidays were. Now we have a fixed calendar. I'm not going to go into the details, but the idea is that the holidays are determined by us and Hashem. Hashem commands us to determine them. Now, Pesach and Sukkot have fixed dates, but Shavuot does not. Shavuot is on the 50th day after we've counted what is called 7 perfect weeks, 49 days of the Omer. Even though Shavuot takes place on the 6th of Sivan, okay, it's not listed as taking place on the 6th of Sivan. It's dependent on our count. That's what's really important about Shavuot. Okay, why? So, because it's the day that we have worked towards from Pesach. On the second night of Pesach, when we start to count the Omer, we're starting with 1, this concept of 1. We're going to count from 1 to 49, which is what we're doing right now. I'm not going to tell you what day it is because we don't say the count in case somebody hasn't counted. But this idea is that we're working on purifying ourselves. We're working on bringing ourselves from this day 1 to day 49. And Shavuot is called a mikveh, the ultimate day of dunking in and purifying ourselves. That's the day that commemorates Matan Torah, the giving of the Torah. And it's also not just a commemoration, it's also when we receive the Torah anew every year. We are literally, what we opt to, receive it anew every year. Now, what I want to do is speak about the Omer because it's important. What is the Omer? What was going on with the Omer? So the Omer was a barley offering. And barley is one of the 5 grains, the 5 grains of Israel. And barley is, it's called sa'or. Barley is considered animal food. It's not considered a human food per se, although we can eat barley, okay? And we know that the Kohanim for sure ate barley, but it's a very coarse grain. It's a hard grain to digest, especially when it isn't completely, when all the husks and all the layers aren't taken off. It's a very rough grain. And barley was an animal food, yet from the harvest, we were commanded to bring the barley, to scorch the grains, to sift the barley, to make a coarse meal out of it, to mix it, to give it to the Kohanim, who would mix it with frankincense and olive oil. And that would become the Korban Omer, the offering to, that would become the offering, the offering of that particular time, the Omer offering. And the Kohen would pick up this coarse meal and its little, pick up a handful of it, I think, and he would wave it. It's also called a wave offering, okay? And he would wave this barley, this animal food, that was mixed with the frankincense and myrrh, which is not edible when you mix it with that stuff, probably. But all the leftover he got to keep and eat. The Kohanim ate the leftovers of the offerings and also specific parts of the offerings when they were animal offerings. So why animal feed? So this idea is the second day of Pesach, we begin this count, the Omer count, to Shavuot. On Shavuot, which is also a Chag of Bikurim, also a type of first fruits offering, first produce. On Shavuot, we offered 2 loaves of wheat bread made out of the finest wheat flour. We went from animal food all the way up to wheat, which is considered the highest grain. And I'll explain in a minute. And this Omer offering was this process of beginning these stages for us to purify ourselves in order to reach Shavuot, when we would be pure enough to accept the Torah, to receive the Torah. Now, this process, which takes place today, was actually compared by Rav Chia or Rav Abba in the Talmud. It was compared to a nida, a woman who needs to count in order to be with her husband again. So for those of you who don't know the laws of Taharas Mishpacha, that most of you do, I think, we count. There's the 5 days of impurity, then there's a count of 7 days, and then a woman goes to the mikveh. Those 7 days, the rabbis liken to the 7 weeks of preparing that count for Shavuot, becoming Hashem's bride. So all of us are counting off days of purity, except we're doing it by the week. And the idea during this time, especially why Rebbe Nachman so emphasized the importance of this time, to say a lot of Psalms this time, a lot of Tehillim during this time, the idea is to purify ourselves, to get ourselves to that next level, spiritually, emotionally, and so on, physically, and so on. So we're going through this counting process. And because we're counting every single day, okay, because we're counting every single day, what's happening is that we are able to remind ourselves of the importance of this every day. Now, it's true that some people have customs not to count. Some women, Sephardic women, generally don't count. Not all of them, but many of them don't. Some Hasidic women don't count. The obligation is technically for men to count with a bracha, with a blessing in a minyan. However, many women count too, because we want to be able to connect with that idea of the intentions for that day, the focus of that day. We want to be able to work on ourselves with awareness so that we can reach the state in which we're ready to receive the Torah. Okay, again, it's not obligatory for women, but it's become a very, important and cherished custom for many women. So this idea of the Omer is we are beginning to count at the same time as they made the Omer offering in the Beis HaMikdash. And that began the count to the first wheat offering in the wheat harvest. Okay. So, hold on one second. Oh, this is also important. So the Omer also gave us many benefits and merits. So I think this is something I really wanted to speak about. Okay, so I want to speak about the waving factor of the offering. The waving ceremony symbolized our acceptance of Hashem, because the Kohanim would wave the Omer all all the directions and very special rituals. I think the Temple Institute reenacts this. You can go online and see if there's a video for it. They reenact all this kind of thing. Okay. And that waving is this connection with the idea that Hashem is in all directions. We connect to him in all directions. What I spoke about earlier carries through to this. Hashem is with us everywhere. He surrounds us. Okay. He fills us. There's no space devoid of Hashem. And this concept, okay, is embodied in this idea of the Omer offering, this waving in all the directions, north, south, east, west, up, down, so on. Okay. And as a reward for the waving act itself, okay, the beginning of the Omer count itself, Hashem protects the harvest from bad winds that can come from any of the directions, and also from harmful dew, like very heavy dew or very cold dew or ice that comes down from above. So for those who say that, oh, well, there's this like very disconnected view that all of these are harvest festivals and that's it. So that element of it is there. These are harvest festivals, but the harvest is really more about the neshama and the Jewish people and the Beis Hamikdash. It's not just about the food. Okay, although that's important. Okay, so what are we up to? All right. I really want to make sure that everybody really understands this Omer concept and that they understand why we did it. And a lot of the offerings were connected with the harvest. Many different types of offerings in the Beis Hamikdash. If anybody's interested, we can do a class on it sometimes. And the idea is we need to know about this now. We need to know about it because we are making these offerings. How? With our lips, with our prayers, with our actions. Okay. And another way we make these offerings is this idea that we give a lot of tzedakah and we do a lot of chesed before each of the Shalos Regalim and all the holidays. But those three, we have a commandment to be very specifically to do it. And this idea is that is going to provide us with a tikkun. So we will be able to celebrate the Yom Tov with joy, with simcha. Because we know the way to alleviate that heavy feeling from us. And that's through tefillah, the offerings of our lips, prayer, hitbodedut, and so on. Teshuvah, returning to Hashem, and tzedakah, to give. And all these three things, we think of them as for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, but really they're requirements of all the Yomim Tovim. Because all of them taken together free us from a lot of heavy spiritual energy, and they enable us to experience joy. Now, I see there are some questions here. So Rachel, and I am taking a little break to look at questions because otherwise I'll get behind. I know I said I'd do them at the end. So Rachel said, like we do with the lulav at Sukkot. Yes. It's a slightly different waving, but yes, it's related to that. And Naomi says, would you say that it's more about the harvest of our hearts for Hashem? Sometimes I wonder if the preparation for Yom Tov, however strenuous, is also a tikkun. So yeah, I mean, sure, we're harvesting our hearts for Hashem. That's a beautiful way to put it. It's very lovely. It's very poetic. Absolutely. And Rebbe Nachman reminds us of what all the tzaddikim say. Hashem wants our hearts. Yes, we lead with the head, but Hashem wants our hearts. You know, I spoke earlier about the kiddush Hashem and how in a way, the ultimate kiddush Hashem is very private. It's between you and Hashem. You're doing it because Hashem commanded it. That's the ultimate love. The preparations for Yom Tov could be strenuous, is also a tikkun. Everything we do, Naomi and everyone, to prepare for Yom Tov is absolutely a way to purify ourselves, to heal ourselves, a tikkun, if you will, a rectification, so that we are at the state in which we can receive the shefa, the abundant flow of that Yom Tov, which comes down in spirituality and in joy, spiritual connection and joy. So, for example, we'll go to Shabbat, since Shabbat is the first holiday that's mentioned in this parsha. For Shabbat, everybody has to do something for Shabbat. And there are many instances in the Talmud of the rabbis. One would chop wood, so there would be wood for the fire for Shabbat. Another would go out and buy fish for Shabbat. Another would so on and so forth. I know someone, he's a very special person, a special tzaddik who has been, he doesn't let, he has a wife as a cleaning lady, he doesn't let anybody else vacuum the house for Shabbat. And now he's in his 70s and he's still doing it. That's his mitzvah of sucking out all the dust from the corners. So yeah, everything we do physically, spiritually, the giving of tzedakah, the prayers, the teshuvah, everything, the cooking, the cleaning, everything we do is absolutely preparation. For Shavuot, though, we have the longest period of preparation. For Rosh Hashanah, technically we have Elul. Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, we have Elul. That falls short of 49 days. For Pesach, we have the 30 days before. I mean, of course, some people start at Hanukkah, but we have the 30 days before where the men start to learn the laws of Pesach and, you know, we really get our acts together. Okay. We have for Sukkot, from Yom Kippur, we have the 5 days. The men go out and they start to, or the women too, they start to help build the sukkah. But Shavuot is 49 days. The 49 days represent the 49 levels of impurity, the 49 gates also of purity. Because the 49 levels of impurity, if we get sunk into that 50th one, very difficult, if not impossible, to get out. And so what we're doing is we're correcting day by day by day. Now, somebody asked me, how do they go through all the sefirot of the Omer, which this parsha, you know, doesn't touch on that because that's the Kabbalah of it. But how do you go through that? So probably the best advice I heard, which I may have mentioned before, but we could always hear it again, is to pick one midah to work on at this time. And you don't have to make an announcement. So if there's something you want to work on that you're uncomfortable with, okay, you know, maybe it's Lashon Hara. It's certainly an apt time to do it since we're speaking the Omer with our lips. Okay, we're counting with our lips. Okay, for someone else, they might have a struggle giving tzedakah. For someone else, it might be sadness and depression. For someone else, it could be a bad temper. It could be all these things. Okay, but pick one thing to work on for this time. And if you just started this concept, fine. So start from today. You still have plenty of time till Shavuot to work on this midah, to find an additional level of connecting with the psychospiritual purity. Okay, more from Rachel. Everything comes from, yes, amen. She says, I think it's a reminder that everything comes from Hashem and also connection to the Holy Land, which we will be, Mirz Hashem, privileged to return to. Yes, yes, yes. Amen, amen, amen. Of course, absolutely. And I'm very excited about seeing all these offerings and how the Beis HaMikdash works. I'm excited to see that. You know, it's not only a spiritual draw, but it's an intellectual draw. It just sounds fascinating. I want to see it. I want to see the beauty. I want to hear the 72-part harmony of the Levium as they sing. I want to experience the grandeur. Who doesn't? So anyway, or if you don't, you know, we need to work on that too. As Rebbe Nachman says, do you want to want? You know, we have to increase our ratzon, increase our desire to even want, really even want. Okay, so there's so much in this parsha. There's one thing that I thought was really interesting from the Arizal, and if you give me a minute, I'm going to find it. It really captured me. it's a little deep, so you're going to have to bear with me as I'm going to share it with you. So this is from Chaim Kramer's book. I did not read the Eitz Chaim, the pre-Eitz Chaim, to find it. But he says like this, that the Ari teaches that the word Omer, okay, which is Ayin Men Resh, contains the same letters as the word Amar, Ayin Men Resh, which is wool, okay? And he says this corresponds to a verse from Daniel. He only has it in English here. I should have looked it up in Hebrew for us, but whatever. The hair of his head was like clean wool. And it's speaking of hairs acting as judgments. Okay, so there's this concept that hair is related to this concept of dinim, of judgments, which is one of the reasons why women cover their hair. Okay, it's one of the many reasons why married women cover their hair, because of this. I don't want to say it's an attraction, but maybe it's a channel for judgments. Okay, and this idea is that where hair represents judgments, the Ari says that's really related to this idea of our mind. Where does our hair come from? It comes from our head. What's in our head? Okay, our mind's in our head, basically. Our brain's in our head, our thoughts. We feel our thoughts in our head. I don't feel my thoughts in my toes. They're in my head. So this idea is that the main sanctity, the main holiness of the Omer, if we want to get into that purity, we have to connect ourselves also with what? With Shabbat. Because Shabbat is the release of judgment. Okay, so I'm going to back up and explain it. When our thoughts, okay, are able to be clarified, and I spoke before about even this idea of not thinking a negative thought can be a kiddush Hashem. Really, it's a private one, but it's a kiddush Hashem. It's a sanctification of Hashem. Okay, when our thoughts don't have this heavy judgment and this heaviness and this weight and this depression or this anger or whatever it is, okay, or this, really the deleterious urges, jealousy. I mean, we don't even want to go there. When our thoughts are clear, we are able to really count the Omer. That's the process of counting the Omer. And in order to do that, we really want to pay attention to Shabbat, because Shabbat is the day in which we have, remember, that's the holiday that Hashem determines here. Out of the 3 festivals, we determine it with Hashem, the timing of it. But really, again, Shabbat Hashem chooses. And on that day, there's an energy that comes down, this special tam of Shabbos, this flavor and taste of Shabbos that comes down, in which we find it easier to have clear thoughts. All we have to do is try. Okay. The rest of the time, our thoughts get scrambled. We're worried about this. We're worried about that. If you're not used to making it, it can be even heavier. But on Shabbat, there's something in the air when we are connecting with Shabbat, when we light Shabbos candles, when we have the sudas, when we make time, we avoid anything secular. Okay, we only focus our minds on Shabbat. That's going to clarify us for the rest of the week. It's like a purification in a way, and that will help us as we work to purify ourselves on the Omer. Okay, so the link, Shabbos comes first, Shabbat comes first in this list for many reasons. Okay, I'm hoping I'm going to get to Shavuot. All right, by the way, if I don't get to Shavuot this week, we'll touch on it next week. Shabbat comes first for many reasons. And what we have to understand is Shabbat is very important. It represents also what we spoke about before, the Geula, the redemption, and Mashiach, because that's the Shabbos of Shabbases. okay? And Shabbat is the time that we get to have that taste. Me'ein olam haba, as we sing at Shalosh Shittas on Shabbos, that little slice of olam haba, the little taste, that little drop, 1/60th of the world to come. And we get to experience that pleasure. Now, what's interesting is today, it's very difficult for people who aren't accustomed to Shabbat to plug in right away. And part of the reason is because the rest of the world is so frantic today that we have to sort of relearn how to slow down, how to shut down, how to honor what's going on, how to avoid the constant stimulus that we're used to. During the Omer count, if you want to expand upon that, what you can do is you can, for example, I can't do this. I need to have my phone in the evening, but you could turn off your phone at night. I certainly turn off my computer the second I'm done with work. You turn off your phone at night. If somebody doesn't need to reach you, you can focus on learning. You can, give yourself that time after the Omer count or for a certain period of the day. Make yourself a taste of Shabbat during this Omer count so that you can just be alone with your thoughts. We're never alone with our thoughts. Who's ever alone really with their thoughts? The second somebody's alone with their thoughts, unless they're used to it, unless they're working on themselves, unless they're praying, unless they're meditating, unless so on. Second people are alone with their thoughts, what happens? They pick up a phone, they pick up a book, they make a call, they run out. It's very difficult. It's very difficult, but this really is the state we have to be in to receive the Torah. We have to be able to make a space inside ourselves for Shabbos and to receive the Torah on Shavuot. And so part of what the Ari is speaking about is very relevant to our day and age. This concept of releasing the dinim from our minds, the judgments, the negative judgments from our minds, getting rid of them on a very prosaic level, our own personal judgments, as well as the judgments, the spiritual judgments, which is what he's really speaking about, that are attached to our thoughts. Shabbat begins the process. If you're not used to it, carve out some time for yourself with nothing secular on Shabbat. We have a rule: no, do not talk politics on Shabbat. We don't read anything secular or anything that's not going to be able to help us connect with this idea of receiving that peace and space on Shabbat. And when a conversation derails on Shabbat, and if you have kids, or if you're, just not used to it, or you have a, family situation or a lot of guests, conversations can derail very gently without scolding. Bring them back. Always have material prepared to focus on. The parsha, I have pages and pages of the parsha to talk about with guests. Anything that's not chol, only kodesh, not mundane, only kodesh. Okay, so we have a little bit left. I think I would like to get to Shavuot, unless there are questions at this point. We are towards the end. Nope. Okay. So Shavuot, we're not going to get to everything today. It's really important. So much of it's all important. So one of the beautiful things I learned, which I did not know before, this is the first time I ever heard it. Let me find the page. Okay. The Torah begins in Bereshis, and it says there was evening, there was morning, one day, a second day, a third day, and so on. However, when it gets to the sixth day, it says Yom HaShishi, the sixth day. The other days it doesn't. Okay. Why does it have the definite article? Why does it have the ha in front of it? Because the Midrash, which is just so delightful, explains that the Torah is actually hinting to another sixth day, the 6th of Sivan, which was 2,448 years after creation, which was the day on which really the point of creation began, which was the giving of the Torah, Matan Torah. And we know that creation without Torah wouldn't exist. There would be no point to it. Many Midrash would tell us there'd be no point to it. And there's no way to sustain everything that's going on in this world without the Torah. We need the Torah to sustain everything. I thought that was beautiful. I hadn't heard that before. That's from the Midrash. I don't know which one because I didn't look up which one, but okay. Now, the Yom Tovim in general, somebody mentioned that they are tikkun. Naomi, I think, mentioned that it's a tikkun, a preparation for that we do things to prepare for the Yom Tovim. So Rebbe Nachman explains that this time the Yom Tovim themselves are an opportunity for a tikkun, not just the preparation for them, although that's necessary as well. So what is this? So he says that each of the Shalos Regalim, the festivals, the pilgrimage festivals, each of them, okay, has a particular base desire that it rectifies. And it's really quite fascinating. And we won't go into all the reasons, but you should be aware of this. So Pesach, okay, rectifies the desire for riches, for money, and everything to do with money, okay? It's the opportunity to correct whatever your issues are around money. We all have issues around money in one way or another, okay? Hopefully it doesn't involve the intense lust for money, but Pesach can even rectify that. I'm going to skip Shavuos for a minute. Sukkot rectifies the desire for food, okay, for more and more fancy foods, for, you know, just delicious foods all the time, this intense desire for food without purpose, obviously, okay? And I always say Sukkot rectifies it because if you want to eat, you got to schlep outside to eat. So you have to really think twice before you eat. Okay, that's not really the reason. That's my reason. Okay, and then the rectification that Shavuot can give us is rectification for immoral desires, sex, okay? And Shavuot has this ability to atone for that, okay? And to help us correct that. Now, in general, in the past, this was probably more directed to men. However, today, as we know, okay, women also have all kinds of struggles that they never had in the past, ever. I mean, just not in our culture, not in Judaism. So this is also something to keep in mind. Now, the short answer for this is we stay up all night on Shavuos, and the men usually say Tikkun Leil Shavuos. That's their mitzvah. It's a tikkun. It contains a lot of different short parts of the Torah and the Kabbalah and so on, and they say this whole thing. And in Breslov, many people stay up 2 nights. That's the custom in Breslov. In some communities, they stay up only the first night. And this idea is, and women also do stay up and learn. There are women who stay up and learn. Moms with young children generally don't. They need their precious sleep. But if you're over a certain age and you want to stay up and learn, you don't have the obligation, okay? But there is a benefit to it. There's a benefit to it. Now, I spoke before about this idea at the very beginning, about this idea of doing something just for Hashem. And the idea is that the value of a mitzvah, okay, is when you do it because it's a mitzvah, not because you're seeking reward or you're seeking brownie points or you want people to look up to you. You're doing the mitzvah because Hashem commanded it. So we don't have this necessarily, this obligation to do it, but because it's such a sweet mitzvah to stay up and learn a little Torah, we can take it on ourselves to do it. Okay, with the understanding that you don't have an obligation. So if you go to sleep or you don't want to do it, don't worry about it. It's fine. And there is no technical obligation to eat cheesecake. I just thought everybody might like to know that. That's also not a halacha, but we do have a little dairy on Shavuot, and I'm going to maybe talk about it next time. Okay, so questions. Naomi, Shabbos is a reset. Absolutely, it is a reset. And so are the Yom Tovim. They are a reset as well. As a matter of fact, the Midrash says that is a beautiful story associated with it. We don't have time, but the idea is that we prepare for Yom Tov. We get rid of all the schmutz. We experience joy on Yom Tov that refreshes us and gives us some zest to start all over again. Okay. Pesach is related to the land of wealth. Interesting. Yeah, I think so. So if you want to listen to the Master of Prayer, read the Master of Prayer. You know what, Naomi? Yeah, I have to go back and look at that. That's a really good point. So the land of wealth is the main focus in the story of the Master of Prayer. It has, 10 times more attention focused on it than the other lands. This is in Rebbe Nachman's story. And interesting. And the chart. Naomi has the chart. Okay, I want to see the chart. Naomi's making us a chart. Ramchal, I think, made us a chart. Someone else made me a chart too. So what we have to do is we have to have a meeting of the chart makers and put it all together. Okay. Are there any comments or questions? I know our group shrunk because of the change in the other schedule. Hopefully there's enough here for people to watch later on if they want to. So a few people told me they will only be able to see the recording. Questions, comments? You can unmute yourself if you want to say something or type something. Nope. Okay. So God willing, we will touch on Shavuot next week. And I want to thank everyone for coming. Thank Charlene for her help. Thank Hannah, everyone who's going to hopefully be sending out that Mashiach book along with some from me. And also thank, of course, Dr. Eleanor Gaudas for sponsoring the Torah class. And I hope you all have a great week. If you'd like to join me tomorrow for a Zamra, please check your WhatsApp or your emails, and you'll get the phone number to call in.
Thank you for the class.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.